Welcome back to Defeating the Darkness, true crime stories with downtown Heather Brown. For those of you who don't know, that's me, Heather Brown. I'm a former prosecutor here in Orange County. I worked in the sexual assault unit, and when I retired, I had been in the homicide unit for 5 years. And today we have a very, very special guest with us who is not just a badass attorney, but a very dear friend of mine for years. We've known each other.
Many years.
Today we have with us Mike Fell from Newport Beach, the law office of Mike Fell.
That's correct.
Now, so Mike, let's talk a little bit about, well, for starters, do you even know why I brought you here, what this podcast is all about?
Well, I figured you're going to ask me a lot of extremely personal questions. I probably have to invoke the fifth a few times, right?
Yes, exactly.
I just figured do you want to chat about maybe our careers and about what I've done and a little bit about victim rights and things like that.
Exactly. So the name of this podcast is Defeating the Darkness. And the reason I started this podcast was because I obviously loved being a prosecutor, and I know you did too.
I did.
We'll talk about that in a second. But I always found that the light shines brightest in the darkest places. And we worked in the underbelly of the criminal world. People are always fascinated to hear the stories. And the thing that always impressed me about when we were working as prosecutors were the people that we worked with. And I miss the people.
Right.
Because, we can tell the stories, but, there's so many people that are in the midst of the darkest places with other people. And, when we were prosecutors, those were the people that were bringing light to the darkness for the victims of crime. But there's a certain kind of person that I think works in those fields that wants to help other people. And when they leave the DA's office, they go on to do great things as well. And so, I'm lonely because, our job was very social, right? You're in court every day. You're in court every day with all of the people that are interested in the same things you are. And then once you, become a private attorney or you retire and do something else, you're not, you don't get to see those people. So I thought I'm going to start a podcast and bring all those cool people that have wonderful stories to tell about true crime and also stories about what they're doing now.
No, and I think that's wonderful because I met you when you first started with the office. I'm obviously much older than you are.
Oh, obviously. I know I don't even look old enough to be out of law school, but
But I do recall that one of the very special times for me, and I know for you too, was working in the sexual assault unit. And I couldn't agree more with your theme of bringing people out of the darkness and into the light, because as prosecutors in the sexual assault unit, unfortunately, most of the time we were working with children who are molested. A lot of times people think of sexual assault as, the woman or potentially the man, but mostly the woman, being attacked on the street and pulled into a dark alley and sexually assaulted. I think what most people don't realize is probably over 90% of our cases were these kids that were sexually assaulted, maybe, and a lot of times by people they knew.
Knew and loved and trusted.
Knew and trusted. That's perfect. And as you said, they came to us in the dark. And as prosecutors, we were the only people that could protect them and get their perpetrator or get justice for them from their perpetrators. And that was a big burden for us. Yeah. But it was also the most satisfying thing you could ever do for a job, in my opinion, and I feel like in your opinion too.
100%. And don't get me wrong, I loved my years in the homicide unit, but I have to tell you, the most rewarding time, the most fulfilling time that I ever had was when I was working in the sexual assault unit, and I did it for 10 years.
Right.
So that was the bulk of my career, and I always was, every day you go home and it feels like a little piece of your soul's been taken away from you, but it's worth it because it's not, to me, it wasn't just justice for those victims. It was when you put someone behind bars for life, right? Because we can really stick it to them with the sentencing schemes that are available to prosecutors. you're really protecting so many other children because they never just molest one.
Well, and I think, my favorite part of the sexual assault unit, and I remember this case, is it was the father of a teenage girl who would molest her friends when they came over for sleepovers. And when I say teenage girl, I'm talking about 12, 13, 14. So preteen and then teenage. And I remember these series of girls, you would meet with them, of course, beforehand, and you talk to them about the prosecution of the case and what's going to happen in court and things like that. And I remember these girls just head held down. You could tell they felt ashamed. They felt dirty. And I remember this one young lady who I actually kept in contact with over the years. And she got up there and testified. And she gave a victim impact statement at sentencing. And it was almost like she was reborn. She came out of this whole horrible situation as a strong woman, held her head high, and felt so empowered. I mean, and that's a key word that we like to use because it's so true. But she held herself up. And a lot of times we think about, how can we put these poor kids through this? But I'll tell you something that did sadden me a little bit is of the 3 victims, she was the only one that got to speak because her testimony was so strong that the defendant pled guilty after her testimony.
Wow.
So the other 2 girls didn't get to sit up on that witness stand and face him and go through the testimony like she did. So she actually came out of it, I felt like, more powerful than the other girls, even though they spoke as well. But it was just that transformation is just so rewarding as a prosecutor. And I know exactly that exactly what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about. And only, the people that deal with it every day see it over and over and over again. And I work for a civil firm right now, in addition to my podcast, having my friends over for fun. But I work as special counsel for a civil firm, and they have a dedicated practice group called Fight for Survivors. And I'm actually going to be publishing a book soon called Defeating the Darkness, How to Prevent, sexual abuse and in churches and schools and institutions that cover up child sexual abuse. But the reason I'm writing that book is for that very reason you just touched upon, Mike, is that only when you see people experience this cathartic rebirth, if you will, where they really truly are empowered, it's palpable, right?
Oh, yeah.
When you're in court, did you feel that? Like you could see the difference in everything about them after they stood up against the dark, evil. To stand up against evil, especially as a child, is so empowering to a young person.
And so scary. So scary. And we can't forget that. But even the way they held them, I mean, like I said before, hunched over when I first met these young ladies and other sexual assault victims. And we'll talk a little bit into what I did after the DA's office, because that was such a passion of mine. But their whole, the way that they stand up, they stand straight up and they look at you in the eye, and it's a total transformation.
It is.
But I have a very important question for you.
Yes.
Do I get a signed copy of your book after it's published?
Oh, 100%. You get 2 of them. 2. So,
well, and I want to ask you this, and you touched on it a little bit, but tell me, and your viewers may be interested in this as well, is that, I mean, you said that you want to do this because you're a little lonely, which I know is not the case. Because, by the way, downtown Heather Brown has lots of friends that love her tremendously, including this one. But what also was the impetus for what you're doing? And to be blunt with you, if you don't mind me asking, what are your goals to achieve through your podcast?
I want to
I know I'm not supposed to be asking the question, but I hope you don't mind.
No, I love it. You really are, actually. It was really just so I had a platform to talk, but I didn't want to talk to myself. So I brought my friends on to ask me questions. You nailed it so far. So really, I love telling stories, as you know. Mm-hmm. And I have people all the time say, tell me this story. Tell my friend this story. Oh my God, tell that story about this. And so, I love to tell stories, and I do think it honors victims of crime. I think there's once, let's say the guy gets convicted and goes away, like that family still has to live with the weight and the gravity of what has happened and the hole that's in their lives. And I do think if there's people out there who care and at least to hear the story, there's some prevention things that are included within every story. But what I think I really want to highlight in this podcast is that if you're in a dark spot, there are people out there who live their lives like you, dedicated to bringing light to dark situations. And the flip side of that is if you're in a dark spot and you can't find the light, I want to encourage people to be the light. That's my tagline.
No, I think that's great.
If you can't find the light, be the light. Be the light in someone else's life, because that's all we have. We live in a dark world where people do really bad things.
Yep.
And the more you're aware of it, the more, you'd be scared to go out of the house. But you just have to stay strong and know that there is light out there. There are people who can help you, people who want to help you. And you're one of those people. That's why I brought you on the podcast, because I want people to know, hey, if you're in a situation and you need somebody to be an advocate for you, and I know you do criminal defense, but I also know one of the biggest parts of your practice is Marsys Law. Tell us about your practice.
Right. Well, and it's interesting because, I've been practicing now for 35 years. And Marsys Law is a constitutional amendment in California that was passed in 2008 by the voters. And I had no clue about it. And this is what I do for a living, right? We're lawyers. And I'd never even heard of it before. And there's I meet victims almost every day that have never heard of Marsys Law. And so if there's a victim listening to this podcast that just hears about Marsys Law and can Google Marsys Law, that person will know all these great rights that they have in California. So someone who has been, in a dark situation, being victimized, I'm hoping that Marsys Law is a little light for them that they can look at. They don't have to hire any lawyer. They don't have to hire me. They don't have to hire anybody.
But they can. But
these are all rights that they have, whether they have a lawyer or not. So, and it's funny because I started my practice in 2009, and a good buddy of mine who's now on the bench, who's now a judge, had said to me, hey, you ever think of practicing Marsys Law? And I'm like, what are you even talking about? And then I read up on it, and I read about this initiative that was passed in California and actually became this constitutional amendment, which is the Victims' Bill of Rights. And victims have all these rights from the time that they are victimized. I have people that call me right after they were, whether it be sexually assaulted or physically hurt, or unfortunately, I have cases where children have been killed. But victims want to know, what are my rights? Well, their rights start right then. And their rights start with talking to the police and telling the police their story. And they can have a lawyer there with them if they want, telling their story. And then I don't want to say making sure the police do their job, because that's not fair. The police are there, they have a passion just like we do. But sometimes it's nice to have that representative that's interacting with the police and saying, hey, how's the investigation going? Or have you looked at this? Or have you looked at that? Of course, I love to play the name game and say, hey, I used to be a district attorney, and I know the DA is going to be interested in this. How's that going?
You've dropped that on me a few times after we worked together. And you know what's so funny? I used to think, like, why does he, you didn't have to tell me you were a DA, but I've heard you drop it, But now that I'm in private practice, people don't know who I am. So I'm like, I don't know you. I was a DA for 24 years. Like, you want to tell them.
Well, and I think not only does it add that, if I can say, that credibility, but especially when I'm working on a criminal case with a police officer, the fact that they understand that I was in that world. Because, for a lot of people out there, don't necessarily know that the process is the police write all the reports. Right. And then the police give that to the DA to decide. And nobody's charged with any crime. Until the DA signs their name on the paper saying, I've reviewed everything and now it's a crime. I'll have a lot of people saying, oh, so-and-so was charged with XYZ. And I'll say, they weren't charged. They were just arrested. It's the district attorney's job to review everything and decide if there's enough evidence to go ahead and charge them criminally. So that's another nice thing about Marsys Law is I interact with the DA. And a lot of times in Orange County, it's someone that I know, and I can say, hey, Heather, when you were in the office, did you look at XYZ in this case? Or did you get these certain reports or whatnot? Unfortunately, everybody's busy, and sometimes things fall through the cracks. And that's unfortunate because sometimes victims lose because of that. Can I tell a little war story?
Yeah, that's exactly why I brought you here.
Okay.
No, don't say another word. I'm just going to talk the whole time. Yes, please do.
So I remember having a case where mother and father came in to see me, and their child was in college, and their child had been sexually assaulted. And they said to me, I don't think the authorities are doing anything. The police aren't doing anything. The DA's not doing anything. The courts aren't doing anything. And we read about you and practicing victim rights. So I met with this young lady who had dropped out of college because she had been so overwhelmed with being sexually assaulted, of course. And she was at a very, very prestigious university. And I called the detective, and I said, I used to be a DA. So I talked to him about that. And I said, hey, I'm interested about doing a cold call in this case. Well, cold calls for your audience are, especially in sexual assault cases, a very good tool, as you know, where you have the victim or maybe the relative of the victim call the suspect on a recorded line, which can only be done with police authorization, and to see what type of statements, if any, this other person's going to make. And the detective was absolutely convinced that this was consensual. And I said, wait a second, this was not consensual at all. I've spent some time with the victim, and we'd like to do a cold call. One had never been done. And that's kind of like sexual assault investigation 101.
It's 101.
Yeah. I mean, so he begrudgingly humored me. And I brought my client in. And she made a cold call. And it was about a 45-minute cold call where he denied it completely at first and then admitted everything. Right? So the case was submitted to the DA's office, which was great. I contacted the DA's office, and the case was rejected. I said, what the heck? So I contacted the DA's office. Oh, it had been sent without the confession.
The cold call, you mean?
The cold call, yes. Mm-hmm. Where the guy confessed.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Where he confessed.
Gotcha.
And I said, oh, my goodness. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was resubmitted. Rejected again. Again, the proper reports were not given. So I contacted the DA in charge of that jurisdiction, told him what was going on. He tracked down the case, reviewed everything, said, could you come in with your client? We came in, another interview was conducted, and the guy was picked up, arrested, and on a $100,000 bail, and ultimately convicted of the crime.
Yay.
Right? So I will tell you what this did for the victim. Without an advocate or without advocating for yourself, that case was dismissed twice.
Yes.
Or I should say rejected twice. That's never going to be a criminal filing. Okay? This young lady who was horribly molested or horribly assaulted would have no justice. And she did get a conviction. And she was in court when he was convicted. She was in court when he was taken away in handcuffs. She re-enrolled in that college. Right?
Yes.
And that's why we do what we do.
That's why we do.
That is why we do what we do.
Those are the moments.
Those are totally the moments. And I feel like I'm not going to do this, but I feel like there's hundreds of those type of cases, which not that anybody's trying to be a bad person or not do their job but things do fall through the cracks and victims are injured 100%. Because of it. Right? So I want you to let you know out there are lots of rights that you have all the way till when the person's going to be paroled in prison. You have a right to be at a parole hearing.
We actually bumped into one another at some shady ass prison in the middle of nowhere. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
You were there.
Professionally.
Yes. Yeah, for the record, Jen and Tom. So I was actually going up because for people who are listening and don't know this, the prosecutors here in Orange County anyway, whenever a criminal who's been convicted of murder or attempted murder gets a sentence, comes up for parole on a really serious crime, the DA's office will send an advocate to the prison to sit there at the parole hearing, and they're able to, you know, ask questions of the inmate through the parole board and bring up the factors and the reasons why we believe that they may or may not be a threat to the community and oppose the release.
And I'll tell you something. After Marsys Law was enacted, if I can go up for another little story, I had a client whose daughter was murdered, and turned out she was murdered by her boyfriend, strangled by her boyfriend. Well, the boyfriend told the parents, "Oh, she's on her way home to see you," right? 'Cause she was flying home, never made the flight. And the boyfriend's like, "Oh my God, I drove her to the airport." I mean, lying.
Yeah.
Helped the family look for her, right?
What a bunch of psychos. There's so many stories like that, right?
And just, right? So here the family is...
It's got to be diabolical to pull that off.
Oh my God. And just giving them hugs and giving them support and going out there to find his love that was murdered by some horrible person out there.
Was he crying?
Well, all along it was him. Of course. All along it was him. So he was ready to be paroled. So I represented this victim at the parole hearing. At the time, there was a push by the governor to release a lot of people who needed to be released. He had a perfect record in prison. He was there had served, I think, close to 25 years. And we did a full hearing, and he was given what's called given a parole date, which means parole was granted. My client was so upset. She's like, "What can we do about this?" Right? So under Marsys Law, we petitioned the governor.
Yeah.
And the governor overruled the board.
I love it.
So there's a lot of power that victims have now. Lots of power. So it changes people's lives, knowing as a victim that you have the power now under Marsys Law to, to advocate for yourself and to go forward and to, get your power back.
Get your power back.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I love that you do all those things. And just going back real quick, just to circle back to what we were saying, is when we ran into one another at that parole hearing, I was opposing the release of murder, but you showed up on behalf. I was like, "What are you doing here out in the middle of nowhere?"
That is correct.
Right? You showed up to advocate for him to stay in prison.
Yes.
And I remember that, and your client, and you'd been going to those parole hearings. You handled that case as a DA now that I'm remembering it.
Good memory.
You were the prosecutor on the case, and you felt so strongly that after, when you left the DA's office, then you would still go with that victim to attend the parole hearings on her behalf to oppose the release of that guy. And he should not have been released, and he wasn't. So great job.
We've done that 10 times now.
10 hearings.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Here was also what was nice about Marsys Law. Before Marsys Law, the maximum that anybody could get was a 5-year parole denial, meaning you can't come back for 5 years, right? That almost never happened. It was usually a 2-year parole denial. Mm-hmm. And the problem is this: once they get denied parole, and the hearings usually are overdue, if you will, just because of everything. So by the time they got a 2-year denial, they could apply it in a few months, and the victim would have to go through this. Marsys Law changed that, and now the maximum is 15 years. So there can be, I think when you and I did it, if I remember correctly, the client got the inmate got a 10-year denial. So that was 5 times what the victim had received previously.
Wow.
I recently did one where where the inmate received 15 years, and again, the maximum. And again, there's no better joy for a victim to be able to feel safe. Matter of fact, the victim that you and I were there on actually said, "I feel like I have my life back."
Oh,
right.
It's those moments.
Yes.
I love that.
Yes.
Okay, so you're just shining the light everywhere. I love that, helping people with Marsys Law. But you also, I I'm told her like a big TV star or something, right? You're like on Real Housewives of Orange County or something. It's so funny because, I just tried out for that show, but apparently you have to be a housewife. So I went for the Real Murders of Orange County instead because that's what I knew about.
But, good.
So you're on the Real Housewives. I can't picture you like in a little French maid outfit or anything.
Yeah, that's why I'm on there. I fit the costume perfectly, right? Right. All you who remember Brady Bunch, remember he became the big singer, Johnny Bravo, because he fit the costume? I'm totally dating myself right now.
That's so funny, Johnny Bravo.
No, it's been, as you stated before, I do criminal defense as well. I stay away from violent cases and I stay away from sexual assault cases.
Okay, so you're not representing any perverts out there.
No.
Okay,
no.
Good.
I will tell you this. I will represent anybody if I feel they're innocent.
Okay.
All right. So if somebody comes to me that's been accused of murder or sexual assault, and I've had some sexual assault cases where I am like, this person is 100% innocent. And I think maybe I've taken less than 5 and every one of them's been dismissed. So I'm very pleased with that. But otherwise, I do not take those type of cases. So I will do other type of criminal defense. And there's plenty of other types of cases where people, do something they shouldn't have done. Let's say that. A lot of times you may be at an outing and you thought you had 2 drinks and you probably did have 2 drinks, but those drinks were pretty big.
Country club pours.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I like to call them.
Exactly. Well, it's so funny because I tell, for you petite people out there, if you go to a bar or a restaurant and you order a glass of wine, okay, 1 drink in California is considered a 4-ounce pour. If you ever got a 4-ounce pour, you would send it back, right?
Yeah, be like, where's the rest of my wine,
exactly.
right?
Every pour is at least 6 ounces, okay? So if you have someone that weighs, 120 pounds and they have 2...
Like me and all my friends.
Yes. And they have 2 6-ounce pours, they just had 3 drinks.
Right.
Most people about 120 pounds are about an 0.4 per drink. That means you're a 1.2 after those 2 drinks. So I have people all the time that say, I swear I had 2 drinks. I go, I believe you. Mm-hmm. It still puts you over the limit.
Right.
Right. So I may have represented a few of my housewife cast members for things such as that. I've also, I also represented one of the cast members. It was very, very public for being a victim under Marsys Law. So yeah, there's a lot of interaction that I've had with the members of the show, and
So they put you on the show?
Well, I'm not on the show all the time. I'm in the show when someone has a legal issue and they want to.
And they're publicizing it.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, because that could probably get dicey being the attorney, right?
Well,
do they ever? I've never watched the show. I'm sorry, I've never watched the show. But
I'm sure you have a lot of fans out there that have. The show.
Yes, no. I'm just too busy.
And I will tell you, it started in Orange County. So all the Real Housewives of
because they have like Atlanta and all that.
Dubai, I heard there's a new one.
Oh wow!
Right? So anyway,
yeah, I do love that Lisa Rinna. Was she on it?
I think that's L.A.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do like her. I saw her on Dancing with the Stars.
I'm sure she's watching this.
Yeah, she was amazing on Dancing with the Stars. I love her. I love her. And her little dances on, I don't know, Instagram or something. But I never actually sat and watched. I watched the dumbest shows. What shows do you, I'm curious, what shows do you watch?
Okay. This is so embarrassing. I like all the crime shows.
Oh my God, you're kidding me. That's so funny.
There is I love the Datelines. Okay. I had someone from Dateline come and meet me in my office, and I felt like I was starstruck. I'm like, oh my God, you're my favorite show.
Oh, right? Really? Did you see me on Smugshot? Did you see the show Smugshot?
I did not.
You had that one about the PTA moms.
I did not.
I'm so sorry. It's the greatest one. It's episodes 5 and 6 on Smugshot.
Okay, I'll have to look at that.
It's about a case I'm actually going to discuss it with one of my, with Matt Murphy when he comes on my podcast.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Did you hear that, Matt Murphy? You're coming on my podcast.
Matt's a great guy.
He is.
Matt's a very good golfer too. We've gone many golf trips together.
You golf. Okay, so what my listeners really want to know, this is the question that they've been writing in about, is from you.
Yes.
Because I've been talking about how you're going to come on my podcast.
Thank you.
They want to know how you scored such a hot wife. No, for real. I'm serious.
How do I answer that? How do I answer that?
I think it is more than the qualities you possess as a really, really wonderful human being in terms of helping people. I think it's more than, how the fabulous gifts you buy her. Honest to God, I think that you and my husband share the same quality. I think it's your sense of humor, Mike.
Well, I'm
pretty sure that's what nabbed her, and your classic good looks.
Well, I got to give my wife a huge shout out because I hate to sound cliche, but there's no way I would be doing what I'm doing now if it weren't for her. She is so supportive. She is smoking hot, right? She's a smoke show.
She's a smoke show,
but she's just as hot in her heart. She's a wonderful, wonderful person. I'm very, very lucky. She was in the investigative section of the DA's office.
She was one of my investigators in the DA's office. She was, and my friend.
And she does some work with me now, and she's wonderful. She's actually, we're doing a Marsys Law case right now together, and she is just phenomenal with the victims. I mean, she's just phenomenal. So I get to work with her a little bit still, and she's still
boss her around. Yeah, I'm sure there's none of that, right?
I'll never forget. So I've got 4 kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
My 18-year-old, who we just dropped him off at college, right? When he was about, I think he was 8 years old, he said to me, he goes, "Hey, Dad, can I ask you a question?" I said, "Sure, what?" He goes, "Are you the boss of your work?" And I go, it's my business, but we all work together. He goes, "No, Dad, are you the boss?" I go, "Okay, I guess technically I am the boss." And he says, "Then how come Mom's the boss at home?" I go, "Because I'm a very smart man."
From the mouths of babes, right? I love kids and the funny things they say.
Oh my God, it's great. It's great.
So you represent. You're on TV. You're a big TV star. Check them out on The Real Housewives of Is it a certain season that you're on, or are you on a bunch of them?
It's been a few seasons.
Oh, ongoing. Yeah. This is a good source of business, right? Maybe I should start watching the show. And you were recently on a podcast with one of the cast members, right?
With Elizabeth Vargas.
Okay. I did have an opportunity to see that podcast. I thought it was great.
Yeah, she was a very good job.
Yeah, she was lovely. I thought she was lovely.
Yes. And hers was the case that was where she was the victim in a Newport Beach case where she was held up in her home by a gunman, and the SWAT had to come out. And it was very, very scary. Very, very scary. And the fact that she's celebrity was not helpful as well, because it did get a lot of press and a lot of news, and obviously it as you know, that when you're a celebrity, your private life becomes your public life as well. So there's a lot of things that we had to navigate in that, but she is a very strong woman and just a wonderful soul. She really is.
It came across in that podcast. Like I didn't know anything about her, and I heard her telling her story on that podcast, and I thought you were great on the podcast.
Thank you. It was a very emotional podcast because I think you don't just, even though he was convicted and he's in prison, it's just you have that fear and you don't forget, and you can't erase it. Just like there's always hopefully great memories that we never erase, right? Whether it's from our kids are young or something, getting married or something wonderful, right? Unfortunately, when something horribly traumatic, I mean, I'm stating the obvious, but when something traumatic happens, you don't forget that either.
Yeah.
And it's hard. I don't care if you're a child or if you're an adult.
And I think that's why I think it does help to talk about it. I think if you are able to, get past something like Elizabeth talked about, and like you said, he went to prison and whatnot, you stand up against that evil. Fortunately, she had you in her corner fighting for her and was able to get through that. But like you said, it still sticks with you. I think the thing about crime that maybe people don't realize is, especially if it's an assault against your person. Like if someone steals your purse, swipes, burgles your car, you can get your property, you can go buy a new purse.
Yeah, but right? A lot of people, I found, sorry to interrupt you.
No.
I found that a lot of people, different people are affected different ways. There are some people that are physically assaulted, whether they're hurt or sexually assaulted, that somehow they're able to put that behind them. And there are some people, like, again, their car gets burgled, and they're like, that was an invasion. Somebody went into my domain, stole from me, especially if it's a of your home. Even you're not at home and they burglarize your home. Somehow they've entered your kingdom. Yes. They've entered your domain, and you just never feel the same. And you move or sell the car. And so I think that's a little, you're absolutely right. There are some people that are great in moving forward, but I think it's a little misnomer that some of these, quote unquote, non-victim crimes, they can be just as hurtful because there is a victim, right? And
yes.
and everybody processes it differently. And I need to give it's not a plug, I just want to give some information. There's something called CalvcB, okay? California Victims of Compensation Board, right? And if you Google CalvcB and you are a victim of a crime and the case is going forward in criminal prosecution, they can afford you up to $70,000, $70,000 a year for things like mental health treatment, fixing your house, fixing your car, God forbid you were disabled, building, grading your house. There's or retrofitting your house is what I was looking for. So it's a great resource in getting funds for victims of crime.
What crime would you be a victim of to retrofit your house?
So, for instance, if somebody...
like a plane piece falls from the sky?
No. It's like they shot you and you're paralyzed.
Oh, I got you.
They will put in like ramps in your house. And
I got you.
Yeah, so they're entitled to... In some sexual assault...
This is a dumb question, sorry.
No. In some sexual assault cases, you can also get pain and suffering, which you only usually can get in a civil case. But I represented a family they lost the father was murdered, and they were entitled to restitution, and we did a restitution hearing. I don't know if it's the biggest criminal restitution in the history of Orange County, but we were awarded $17 million in restitution. So,
wow.
Criminally, not civilly, criminally.
Wow.
So victims have a right to financial compensation in the criminal court. Yes. And again, I think it's important for your listeners to know that information.
No, very important. Does it have to be a filed case by the DA's office for them to afford themselves of the opportunity to call this California Victims Compensation Board and get some monetary compensation for the losses? My
understanding is no, it does not. As far as getting criminal restitution ordered by a court, then yes, it has to be a case that was not only prosecuted, but there was a conviction.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
But do they have to have reported it to the police?
Yes, obviously? For CalvcB,
right.
You have to be cooperative with prosecution. It's got to be a certain type of crime.
Okay. So it's not just anybody be like, hey, someone stole my purse. I want to get a new purse. Let me call the...
That's a very good point.
Okay.
Yes.
Just so they don't get flooded with...
Right. But they're pretty good at letting people know right off the bat, what you're compensated for, what you're not compensated for. Your case is one that fits. Your case is not one that fits, if that makes sense. But it's a great resource. And then if the person is convicted, that person, if they have funds, has to pay back CalvcB for the money that CalvcB gave to the victim.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I like that.
Stuff we didn't know as a DA.
I know.
Right? There's so much that I've learned.
Well, I would get those letters from them saying to order it in restitution at the hearing so they can compensate them, right?
Yeah.
For like funeral expenses and stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's all those, of course.
Yeah, there's tons of little areas of the law that you wouldn't necessarily be exposed to, but now you are, and you're the expert in that area. You're the only attorney that I know of in Orange County to refer people to that's doing that. So
it's not, I wish there were more people that did it. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, what I would love to see is Marsys Law attorneys appointed by the court. Unfortunately, that's not the way it is.
So they do have to pay for your services.
They do.
Yeah.
The bummer is this. The defendant, if they don't have enough money, they get a free lawyer.
Right.
The prosecution, obviously, that's provided by the state, but there's nothing for the victims. And I'm hoping one day there will be, okay, you're a victim, you get an appointed attorney as well.
How do we make that happen?
Legislation.
Yeah. No, I think we need to bring some awareness to that for sure.
Yeah.
Because you're right. Because it's almost like I was the victim and now I have to pay for an attorney to represent me.
100%. And that's the hardest part of my job is telling people. I always love to explain to people about Marsys Law. They don't have to pay me for that. Right? If they call and they want to talk about it, I'm happy to do that. Let them know how the system works. Let them know what their rights are. And then for people who want me involved, then I do have to, I charge them my hourly rate for that. If we can get that back through the process, that's great. Most of the time we can't, just to be candid with you. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting because I thought it would be an impetus to having people hire me. I thought it was just going to be something maybe on the side that I could just give advice on. But I find that people want somebody and they are more than happy to say, I'll pay you to represent me. I'll pay you to advocate for me in court. So the response has been very, 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 very nice as far as being able to provide that service to clients.
Yeah, that's great. And so if someone needed to hire you as a Marsys Law attorney to help be an advocate for them as a victim of crime, how do they reach you?
So
law offices of Mike Fell?
Law office of Michael L. Fell. I mean, my numbers.
Do we have to call the Real Housewives of Orange County?
But I'm on the internet. You can just Google my name.
Google your name.
I mean, my phone number is 585-9055. That's area code 949. But and then with my clients, I give them all my personal cell phone, so they certainly can call my cell phone after calling the office. Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, Are you doing anything else I need to know? Are you writing books? Are you coming out in movies? What's the story?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm trying to get my golf index down. Right? So I'm trying to slow down a little bit if I can at work. That's not working out great, but I'm still working.
You are kind of a workaholic.
I have
talked to your wife before.
I know, right? So.
But you care so much. You care so deeply. And I know I just got to give you a shout out because I know you've always answered my call. Like if I have a legal question, I'm like, oh, who would know this? I call you.
Well, in downtown Heather Brown calls, you pick up that phone.
You're damn right you do. I love it. Well, gosh, thank you so much for coming on the show.
A pleasure.
I really do think that you are an amazing attorney. And hilarious, even though he doesn't seem very funny right now on the podcast, but he's very, very, very funny, and just fights like a dog for all of his clients. I know that for a fact because I've had to listen to him go on and on when he was a defense attorney while I was still a DA. And I just love you for it. And I love your wife even more. She's amazing and super smoking hot. And lucky you lucky dog. But I just want to thank you for being a light in the darkness for people. And I thank you. Thank you for sharing your stories. If you ever want to come back and tell us some more, I'd love to have you. And
absolutely. Anytime. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun. It has been fun.
Yeah.
And all right. Well, that's a wrap for today. You can catch us. We'll be streaming on YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and iTunes. So listen to us, Defeating the Darkness. And as we leave today, the last thought I have for the day is, if you cannot find the light in the darkness, be the light.
Be the light, shine so bright.